right, I think we should be roughly good to go. Apologies for the potentially late start there. I actually had this going, but there was just a notification and there's some exciting stuff about to happen. So, um, the plan for this evening was to work on something for the Sublime Scraps repository that we normally I think I've shared quite a few links to. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry, there we go. I think we've shared quite a few links to that during the Devember videos in regards to. Um, is this too dark? Hang on a second. Yeah, this is probably okay for what we're doing here. Seems a little darker in here than is normally the case. Um, in any case, we got a little bit of stuff to do here. So as I was saying, the plan for this evening's live stream was to work on not a something Sublime Text related, but not a Sublime Text package per se. In that there's a script that I created called the Sublime Session Cleaner for clearing out projects and workspaces from the Quick Switch project list that no longer exist because there's not a way to do that in native Sublime. And someone asked recently on the forum for a way to clear out the recently used files and folders that no longer exist. And this script doesn't do that, but perhaps we could do that. So that's something we're going to do there. But as it transpires, not 5 minutes before the stream started, there was a new tarball dropped. So I think we need to look at that too, possibly first. I'm not entirely sure, but what we're going to do here, I think, is actually transition into doing a little something with the actual stream itself. So we should probably jump right on in to the live stream content now and get it rolling from there. Alrighty, so here we are down in here, and I didn't finish the stream output or stream setup that I normally do before the stream starts because I noticed that there was something happening in the Discord. So um, we're going to need to do a little something like this and this and this and let's say that as well. No, you know what? We're gonna leave that one there because I'm gonna close it in just 1 second. And what we're going to do now is quit Sublime. Oh, I guess we got to drop out of here first and quit Sublime and pop into here. I'm going to close that and we're going to do a little bit of this and then we'll be ready to rock and roll. Da, da, da. And the newest one is 5. And then, oops. I got a little ahead of myself with what I was typing there. This one. And we are ready to rock and roll. So the first thing I'm going to say now that we're sort of all in there, this sort of got me a little flustered and discombobulated was, hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. Welcome to the live stream for a date that I do not currently have available because my Fitbit is off in the charger. I want to say the 28th of January. Yeah, that seems like it's probably right. And the purpose of this live stream, as we said just briefly in the introduction, if you haven't seen that part, is there's a script in the Sublime Scraps repository on GitHub in the Stealthy and Hasty GitHub organization. That is me and Keith Hall, another member of the Sublime Text community who does a lot of work with the default syntaxes. We put plugins in that repository as we answer questions in case there are people that would find them useful. One of the things that's in there is not a Sublime Text plugin per se, but rather a script you can use to modify the Sublime session file to remove projects from the session that no longer exist and workspaces that no longer exist when you use that quick switch project. And if you don't know what those are, then down in the description of this video is a link to my other channel. You should subscribe to it because it is full of Sublime Text tips, tricks, and tutorials. And one of those is a video all about projects and workspaces. And somebody recently asked on the forum if there was a way to clear out and clean the list of recently used files and folders in a similar manner, and the script that I wrote doesn't do that. So I'm gonna see if I can remember how this thing works and do that tonight. But while I was setting up the stream, and that's why things were a little discombobulated here, there was something new that was announced. So in the Discord, so we're gonna pull a little bit of this because we can see that one of the items in this build is add HTML sheets, which can be created via window.new HTML sheet. So I think we might need to play with that for just a second. So I'm going to create a new window for that, which is actually what we want anyway. So we can close that one and maximize this one up. But what if we said window equals new HTML sheet? Whoops. Window.new HTML sheet. We'll capture its value like so. This is actually something that John mentioned was potentially coming way back in December, or either in the middle of December or just at the beginning. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about in the Discord, but he said something like, rumor has it that there's going to be new sheet types. So, missing 2 required positional arguments, name and contents. So my sheet, and what would we put in here? Maybe say body, hello world. Can I select text in here? No, I can't. But that seems to work quite nicely. Huh. All right, here's something we are going to try. We are going to very temporarily pop override audit open. We're going to open that one, and we're going to, whoa, maybe we're going to close this now. Oh, and just talking in the Discord here for a second. Initial. Having some fun playing with it right now. If you're not already in the Sublime Text unofficial Discord, you should probably be there because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. If you go to the forum, there's a linked post at the top, and one of the things in there is a open invitation to be able to join the Discord. Previously, there were text sheets and image sheets. This adds a third sheet type that contains a mini HTML control. So what we're actually going to do in here is open the pop-up package pop-up thing, because what we want to do is render pop-up. We want to print the value of render pop-up. Where's render pop-up called? It's already, whoop, this one. Okay, so we're going to print, we're going to do that, okay? And then we're going to find override audit.py and save that to reload this thing so that we can go to the package report, bing this, find override audit in this list somewhere, and go boop. And yeah, that didn't work as expected. Unsurprising. I can't still have 100% certainty that that actually does what one might expect it to do. Let's try that again. Reload that, and well, I probably could have done that, huh? There we go. Okay, so now if we had this, Oh, actually, this is the content we want to put into this thing. Does this doesn't include the? Yeah, I guess we also need this CSS for this thing too. So we probably need a little bit more stuff. Bum, bum, bum. CSS equals. We want this one. My bad. Actually, we might say import. Oh, actually, let's do this. If we save that and then we save this, ooh, well, at least we know it's loading the thing now. Oh, crap. Oh, yeah. All right. We'll do it twosies, shall we? We'll do this. And then we will cut that and put it here. A memory is a terrible thing to waste. So that's going to look like that. We're going to get the body. We're going to do that. And then we're going to do this. And we're going to save that. And then we're going to save this to reload the plugin. Then when we come over to here and go like so, do we end up with all the stuff? No, we don't. And that is like weird, man, because clearly it's reloading this thing. I wish package resource or automatic package reloader was working for me. I got to do a little something about that. Okay. Oh. Yeah, I know. That breaks it. That's why I don't push that key. There we go. That's more like what we want. Okay. So if we had this, we could copy that and say HTML text equals that. Then if we came back over to this window, wow. Oh, that actually works pretty damn good, I gotta say. Let's click this thing. Oh, no. Nope. I wish I could not remember how these things go. Hello, Ashwin. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated here. The world's all topsy-turvy. I completely lost track of what it was I was actually trying to pull off, and I covered up my chat window with the Discord there. In case you hadn't noticed, there was a new version dropped. We're playing a little bit with this new HTML sheet, but what we want is to be able to select a region. So we can go like this. Copy that to the clipboard. Let's boop that. Just sharing an image with the old Discord. The hardest part. Alrighty. Anyway, that is not at all what we were planning on doing here, but when there's new functionality, you got to play with it. You got to play with that thing. Okay, so what we're gonna do here, we're gonna close this window for now. And that was the only thing there. Yeah. Here's actually something interesting. If we quit this and come back, yeah, it remains in there. So that's nice. What we're going to do now, we actually need to get on track with what it is we're doing because we're burning time here. We'll open a terminal for this thing. So there's a script Yeah, so many new recent builds with new API endpoints. This is a, a tinkerer's excitement. There's even a bunch in the new API that I haven't actually played with yet, like being able to open projects directly from the API and stuff like that. Being able to get events right when window is first created. Oh, and there's also the exciting thing here is see, I've been using Sublime since mid 2016. It's 2020 now, the start of 2020. So that's like a good long while. The number of questions and things that people have had over the years that required being able to detect when a new window was created, just that thing alone, and knowing that it's not 100% foolproof. There's no real 100% foolproof way to do it without a ton of polling. Being able to detect when a new window is created or when a window is closed, because you can only do it by either tracking commands as they're executed, like close window and new window, um, or by sitting and saying how many windows are there and asking Sublime to iterate the windows and then waiting a second and then doing it again and then seeing if the numbers change. Because on Mac OS, you can create windows by clicking on the dock icon if there isn't already a window, because on Mac OS, applications stay running in the background. Um, and even if there's no windows, which I guess is part of the perception that things start up faster there. They're really just always running, but you can't really tell. Um, and if you close Windows by using the X or something that's window Chrome, then Sublime wouldn't tell you about it. But now there's an API endpoint for that, and that is pretty exciting. Um, so what we're going to do here, which is Sublime Text related, but not directly, because it's something that we're going to play with the session file. If I was to diff the Sublime session clean here with the one in my local source, scraps, nope, Sublime scraps, plugins, no, session cleaner. All right, so I have a typo in mind that is not in that one. So we should be able to edit this one with impunity, and we still have a version that's known good. So the purpose of this particular script, ooh, new bug to report. Do this. Huh. Interesting. Hang on a second while I just pop something into the chat. And okay, so yeah, let's actually do that for real. Just reporting that one of the new things that is in these last couple of builds is the ability to do something like this. For those that haven't been following the Discord, pipe this into like this and have a tab open. Which is interesting because 2 days before this popped up, or even a day before, someone on the forum was asking, because macOS has the ability to do this, but Linux and Windows didn't, and now it does. But they're having some problems wibbling this around, per se. So I just reported that was happening. So we maybe go in and out of focus here a little bit because John's in the Discord right now. What better time to point out to someone that there are problems than when the developer is actually sitting ready to talk to you? And that seems to be a repeatable thing as well. We're going to go ahead and close that. Um, this is, okay, we're still talking to John there. This might be one heck of a stream. The purpose of this thing is to be able to do this. Sublime session clean, like so. And it says no missing items found. The deal with this is you can run this script, which is a pure Python script, and this is available on the. Here, you know what I could do if I was a nice guy that actually knew what was going on, um, would be to open a new tab and go like this and blop this over here, and then pop into GitHub and say Sublime. Go away. It was right under there, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. Well, that's the correct repository anyway. Show more. Ba-ba-ba. Well, I would have thought that it was one of the more popular ones. Oh, I guess it probably wasn't. I was expecting it to be something slightly different. If we were to do a little something like this, then I will take this and paste it here into the chat for anybody that may be interested in this sort of thing when it happens. But essentially, that there's also a README in here that explains how this thing works and such like that. Um, but the idea is that Sublime keeps track of the projects that and workspaces that you are using. When you have Sublime running and you use the quick switch project panel like this, and anytime there's a Sublime project or a Sublime workspace, they're in here so that you can easily swap between projects. If you decide that one of those projects doesn't exist anymore because you delete it, you're no longer working with it, then it's still going to sit in this list clogging things up, and there's no way to take it out. And that happens for projects as well as workspaces, which are more or less the same sort of thing as far as that is concerned. Excuse me. So the Sublime stores this Sublime session file in your data directory in the local directory. It's in the file name session.sublimesession that stores tons and tons of information. That's the place where if you just have windows that don't have projects associated with them, where the information about if a file is open and unsaved and all of that sort of stuff, your find history, the console history, the list of files and folders that you have recently worked with, even the stuff that it uses to keep track of what you do in the command palette, because I don't know if a lot of people have ever really noticed this or paid much attention to it, but when you open the command palette and you type in some text and filter, Sublime's using smart fuzzy matching to try to find the commands that match that. And if you choose a certain command based on some filter text, then that command is, even if it's not the first one in the list, the next time you type that same text, Sublime knows which command you picked last time, and it picks that one first by default. That's where the selection goes instead of to the first match in the fuzzy search. And the same thing happens in the go to anything panel. If you type in part of a file name segment and pick some file, it'll remember what file you picked. So it sort of learns over time how you search. That information is stored in the session as well. And this script looks in there and purges those things out. And we want to be able to also do that for the list of files and folders that have recently been used if those things no longer exist. Hang on a second, John is perhaps. Ooh. Someone thought this was Sublime. Yeah, there's John was just pointing out that you can use set contents on a sheet to be able to change its contents after it's already been created. That is a pretty skookum on its own. So anyway, again, we keep sort of getting pulled in several directions here. This is sort of the problem with being on the bleeding edge and wanting to provide bug support for people that are based in Australia that have a different time zone. This script only does the folder and the project stuff. We want to do that for folders as well. Now, partly what complicates this is the fact that it's been a while since I worked with it. But also, as we can see here, Sublime Merge shares a code base with Sublime Text, and as a result of that, it also stores a session and it has the same sorts of stuff in it. Not quite in the same format because it doesn't have as many things, but this is smart enough to be able to do the same thing there. So we could say Sublime Session Clean, and we could say dry run like so, and it thinks there's nothing like that here, and we could say -- program merge to see the same thing, that there's no Git repositories that I've opened in merge that are now gone, but it would be able to purge those as well. So whatever we do here, we have to try to also do, where possible, to Sublime merge as well, which makes that kind of tricky, but we're going to fire this up. And we can see here also part of the magic of this. And maybe we should just sort of go through this to get a sense for what all it's doing, because I also don't remember. But one of the things is it needs to know where the data directory is. And this is also going to have to change for the new builds because there's multiple potential data directories, but one problem at a time. If you're on Linux or Windows or Mac OS, these are the locations where probably these are not where probably, if you're not using a portable version of Sublime, these are the places where the data directory is for Sublime Text and for Sublime Merge. And we're going to, as we can see here, expand the twiddle character to be the home directory, and we also expand. Actually, I think app data should get expanded on Windows. Yeah, we expand variables in that one to expand environment variables instead of the twiddle. What kind of things does Sublime Session keep track of? Well, it's funny that you say that, because we should probably open one of those things up so we can look and we can get a sense for what it is we're doing here. So if I do this, this is the packages directory, right, which you can get to by using preferences, browse packages. We've seen that like a billion times. Go up one directory to the directory where you can see the installed packages directory and lib and stuff like that. There's a directory named local. We can see I have a symlink to this file right here. Well, you might not be able to see that because the thing is covering it up. So let's go ahead and do this. Can never always forget that the webcam's down in the bottom. So here's the data directory, right? And there's this directory named local. I have a symlink to that so I don't have to look in. Here in this local directory, there is the actual, there's your license file. This is where your Sublime license is stored. You can store, this is normally a binary thing, but you can store it as a text file version instead if you want to. We can discuss that if anybody cares. And this is the actual session file, and I keep backups of these things going way back, including this one where for some reason things didn't work and I couldn't figure out why Sublime couldn't restart based on the session. I slowly added things back until the new session was the same as this one, and it just kept not working. But if we were to look at session.sublime session and bring it in, we can see this sort of stuff. And there's a list of, first of all, this is the list of all the folders that I have ever used in Sublime. Some of these may or may not still be here, and I had to work on some projects that I was not entirely happy about, so there may or may not be some unkind words in the names of some files here. The last version that was executed is 4065. The last window that was active had this ID. Index logging was turned off. Here's a list of settings. How big should a new window be? And when a new window is created, there should be these lists of selected items. This sort of is matching for autocomplete. When you type these characters, this is the completion that was chosen. So if you imagine you open the autocomplete panel, whoops, that's this key. I open the autocomplete panel here. So if I was to type PKG and then choose manually go up and pick this one, then an entry would be in this that said, when you type PKG, you picked package folder. So the next time you were to come in here and type PKG, You see it automatically picks package folder. Well, actually, that might be a bad choice. Let's say this. I'm going to choose this one. Um, maybe I'll actually do it correct. What do you say? I'm going to open the panel, type PKG, choose package pop-up, and expand it. And then if I did the same thing again, I think we should see it's automatically saying pop-up because it remembered that's what I did last time. And this is done for tons of things. Even here, if I say scratch buffer prompt for syntax, this is the thing that pops to the top, even though there's probably other commands in here, but Sublime knows that when I type this, this is the command I pick, so it always jumps it to the top. In fact, we can even see there's like quite a bunch of them in there. And the same thing happens if you use go to anything. If I typed S and picked this, then even if I'm in this file, when I type S, it automatically chooses that one because it remembers that's what I chose last time. Does it keep track from the time ones install st freshly? Yeah, this session file basically lasts forever unless you manually remove it. And there's like a bunch of stuff that's in here. So those are the things that, these are under new window settings. So these are the sorts of things that are automatically popped in whenever you create a new window. There's certain state in this that's just already known, and that comes from these things here. Build system choices. Whenever a particular type of build was chosen, this is the build system that was chosen for it. You know, if you do that thing where you have a build system with multiple variants. From the command palette, here's that, you know, when I go to the command palette and type remove, I probably want to remove a package. You can see that one's not even at the top of the list, but Sublime, because of this line, remembers that's what I chose last time. And like I said, I don't know how many people notice that it actually does that, but it just sort of, it's so intuitive that you sometimes might not even notice. John says HTML sheets handle on navigate via a command rather than a lambda, so things work as expected after a restart. You can see what's going on by passing command equals echo to new HTML sheet. Oh, maybe we should play with that for a second. HTML text is going to be gone, so we're going to just say hello. I'm not entirely sure. I think we might need. Oh, yeah, that's to be expected, I suppose. I guess we probably need an actual link in there, don't we? Hang on. Sorry. href equals, let's see, sample, and we'll go ahead and do that, right? And then, sorry, we need that. And then /a. Command equals echo. Do that. Hello is a link. When we click it, we end up with URL sample. Cool. Boop, 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 boop. So if we quit and come back, it'll still remember that. I'm going to go ahead and click this button here and choose fireworks because that's pretty neat. I'm just gonna very quickly quit and restart because yeah, you can reload that. One of the things we have to be careful of is you can't modify the session file while Sublime is running because it saves the session when it quits and reloads it when it starts. So if you try to modify it while Sublime is running, your changes get unceremoniously whapped away. As a matter of fact, this icon up here that I used to start Sublime actually executes a shell script that first runs Sublime Session Cleaner if Sublime's not already running, and then runs Sublime so that my project list is just always kept clean. Yep, that works as expected. That's neat. So getting back to what we were talking about here, folder history, we talked about settings. So autocomplete is a thing. Build system choices is a thing. Command palette is a thing. Here's a list of all the stuffs that we have typed into a console. So we can see all that stuff. distraction-free settings. File history, this is one of the things we're going to be fiddling with. All of the files that we have opened at any particular point, which may or may not still actively exist. And so all of this stuff, when you first start Sublime, for the very first time, there's absolutely no session information at all. So you just end up with one tiny little window, or whatever, however it starts on your platform. From that point forward, anytime you quit Sublime, assuming you have hot exit turned on, I can't remember now. I think some information is still persisted into the session. Hot exit only stops it from storing other things in here, like stuff like the height of the incremental find panel and whether the menu is visible and the height of output panels and all that stuff. And these sorts of things would all still be in here. But one of the other things that will appear in here, um, if we were to look down far enough, here's a list of all the windows that existed at the point where Sublime was quit. So we can see the list of workspaces and recent workspaces in there. And this would also, oh, sorry, we've got to do that a different way. The autocomplete information for this window. Here's a list of all the files that were open at the time when this window was closed. And the file Sublime Session Clean was open with line endings set to this and this buffer size, but that's all there was because I never modified that file, right? And then there was also Sublime Session open, and it has contents in here because we modified the content of that buffer when I was playing with the autocomplete thing. So there was unsaved changes in the file. Those contents are saved right here into the session file, and that would allow Sublime to automatically repopulate this with a tab with the associated file because it knows what the file name is. It knows what the file used to be, what its time used to be, any specific settings that may have been set in there, and then the content of the file as it appeared when Sublime quit so that it can still know if it's unsaved or not on disk. So if you were to open like a 5 megabyte file and Sublime crashed, then you can get yourself into a problem, perhaps in some cases, because the session stores the content of the file if you like modified it while it was still like loading. Or that's probably a bad example, but essentially it's possible for you to do things that make the session uh, put itself into a state where things are unrecoverable or at least recover very slowly. And there's the build system choices used in this window and so on and so on. Command palette stuff for this particular window because these things track on a window by window basis. If I had two windows open, one of them would have different history in it than the other one, right? Now, if you use projects, then the information about the window, the content of the window, what files were open, what tabs, even the layout of the window, whether it's like split or single, that's all stored in the session file. Unless you have a project, it would be stored in the Sublime Workspace file instead. And it's also stored there if you don't even have a project and you're just working with a Sublime Workspace file. So one of the things our script is going to need to do is pull this global folder history and then be able to, one at a time, examine all of these folders to see if they still exist. And the idea is to take the entirety of this Sublime session file, which is just JSON, although that's not what it's reflected as down here because this isn't a known extension. But I guess we could probably do something like view syntax open all with current extension as, and then zoop on down to the letter of the alphabet that I don't, it's way up here. Donk. And if we were to close that and then reopen it, now it's a JSON file, which may or may not have any effect on anything. But I guess it's nice for it to know what the thing actually is, right? So we need to scan through this, find any folders that no longer exist, and take those out of the list. And then there's also there's more than one of these because there's one for every window. There's not just, this is sort of like a global one. I'm pretty sure when I was fiddling around with this the other day, I noted that there was a version of it. Okay, there's a file history in there. Is that the only one that's in here? We'll have to double check this. Here's a list of all of the groups that were open. And there was These sheets had a buffer ID of 0 with that file. It's not semi-transient. If their regions were persistent, that's where they are. Various settings that are set into this thing. If you're doing that thing we were talking about in the last stream where you use a setting, a view-specific setting to persist information, it ends up in this part of the session file. So that's how they come back automatically when Sublime rebuilds the session. It knows exactly what settings it applied in there. Um, do, do, do. Now, the fun part of this is there's one of these in merge as well. So we need to worry about that. So if we search for folder history, there's, oh yeah, only the one of those. Okay, but I think there's, let's see, one of these on line 3957 and another one here. So there's more than one of those. So that'll be like a second aspect to this thing. I'm going to close this window for the time being, just to put things to a state where we're happier with them. And I think I might take a little sample of coffee here. Excuse me. So the purpose of this script is to find this session file. It loads it as JSON. It pulls certain keys out. In this case, just the list of projects, which I think is down near the bottom of the file, if I had to remember this thing right here. Recent workspaces. In the workspaces key under recent workspaces, a list of all the Sublime workspace files that are in here. There could also be projects in here sometimes as well, I think. This may have changed since in the more recent builds. Excuse me, I'm really having a thing. And after it has manipulated the stuff, it writes the file back. So the location of the session file is in a well-known location, depending if you're on Linux, Windows, or Mac OS. It's in your home directory on Linux and Mac OS, and it's in app data under Sublime Text 3 if you're on Windows. And if you're not using if you're using a portable version, then this won't work, and you have to pass an argument to the script to tell it where the data directory is so it can pull this file out of there. If you're using Sublime Merge, the same thing happens. Now, the directory is named Sublime Text 3 now because that's what it used to be named, or is still named for the current stable versions. Only these new 4000 build series for the what we're again referring to as Sublime Text 4, but it's not really Sublime Text 4. They're changing it to not have a number in the name, so it's just Sublime Text. And one of the things with that is this directory here. This is what's referred to as the data directory. Can be named Sublime Text 3 or just Sublime Text. If Sublime Text 3 exists, then the newer builds will use it. But if there's a Sublime Text, it'll use that instead of Sublime Text 3. And that's sort of like a twofold thing because going forward, new installs can use the shorter named one, and this allows for a nice transition for people. And also, it allows you to have Sublime Text 3 and the newer builds installed side by side with each other because you could set them up to not share the same data directory. I share the same data directory with mine, so that's why you sometimes see if I have this open like this and I quit and then I come over here and open Sublime 3, what pops up in here doesn't render properly until you focus something, and that's because the session information changed in the new build. And so the newer build knows how to read the session from the older one, but the older one doesn't know how to read the session from the newer one because how could it? So that's sort of a deal that I'm going with there because I want to have that version installed for helping people on the forum and stuff like that. And then every time you do that, one of the things in the session stores what the last version was so it knows that it can pop this thing up as well. And we'll just do this. I didn't. Ben wants to know if there was anything in the console when that happened. So let's see if I can get it to fail now. Oop, touch that. Nope. The console doesn't report any error in that case. So, okay. Now I kind of forgot what it was we were talking about there. Oh, session information. So, yeah. So this script is going to have to change in the future to take note of the fact that either of these things could exist. You might have to specify the data directory. I'm not entirely sure how to handle that, but since the newer builds aren't officially public yet and you have to be in the Discord to know about them and where to find them and stuff, that's sort of less of an issue in this case. And we can support merge sort of the same way. So this figures out the data directory. If the platform starts on Linux or Windows, then it uses the appropriate thing up there depending on which program you're using, and either expands the twiddle to your home directory or expands environment variables. So $app data becomes, that whole big Windows path thing. And then on if it's neither of those, we expand user in OS X instead. And I can't remember why this is the way it is. Oh, the platforms might not quite line up. Seems like this could be a little bit nicer. I think there's a reason why it's done that way. This is what actually loads the session. If it has a file name and the appropriate program, it knows to pull. It can load the session information. It can load. Oh, so here we go. If the program is merged, then the key is named recent, but otherwise the key is named recent workspaces, and then it returns back the session and the items that it's going to deal with, and then it can log errors. And to save a session, you give it a file name and a session, and it just writes it back. But as we can see, it writes it as a temporary file before it writes the thing in. File name equals file name plus .temp. Save the session dictionary back to disk in the appropriate folder using a temporary name. The name of the file is returned if the new session is successfully saved, because the thing that actually calls this, if this returns none, it does nothing. But if it did work, then we'll see something that happens here. So more recent versions of Sublime Merge use the recent list that contains state for the repository instead of just a path. And in order to see that, we'd have to come here and go down a couple directories and go into Sublime Merge. And just like in Sublime Text, we can go into this local folder, which again, you probably can't see because the camera's in the way. So I'm in that directory, and I could session.sublime session that thing, and we can see. Whereas here in Sublime, in its session information, probably would have been smarter to just do that. The key's named folder history. It's an array. It's a list of folders. Here in Merge, the key's named recent. It's an array. It's a list of objects. Should the diffs ignore white space? Should the location bar be visible? The height of the windows and all that sort of stuff that What's this? Oh, I can also see an autosave session in my data directory. That is something that gets written periodically while Sublime is running. So it's sort of one of those. Normally, Sublime saves the session when it exits, but it also saves it periodically. And if there's an autosave session, I believe it'll use that one instead of the last officially saved session. I gotta close. I can't see the chat popping as often in here if I don't have that window also there. So apologies for how much longer that might have taken for me to notice you asked that question. So yeah, there's also an auto save session in there, just in case Sublime actually crashes. You can try to get back some stuff. For example, if you had files open that were unsaved, those are saved in the session, so you don't lose all of your data, hopefully, unless the crash happens while the auto save session thing is having a problem. So yeah, that's also a thing. So we have here in this program a thing that knows how to figure out how to get a path out of one of these things, because if it's a Sublime thing, then it's just an array item. We don't have to do anything special, as we can see here. If the program is merge and the thing is a dictionary, then we need to get the path key. But otherwise, we can just return exactly this thing. Item would be the entry in the array. So here the item is a dictionary. Here the item is a string. And older versions of Sublime Merge actually used a format similar to this. The key was still recent, but the list in here was just the list of Git repositories. And then there was a build, I don't know the number off the top of my head, where storing the state of the UI on a project by project basis was something that they wanted to be able to do. So that this sort of changed in that thing. So this actually is backwards compatible with that. Now here's sort of where part of this could go a little awry. In order to determine if something exists or not, we ask Sublime, we ask the OS uh, to say if it's a directory or if it's a file, if it's merge, ask it, is this path a directory? And if program is merge, ask it if that's a directory. Otherwise, ask it if that is a file, just because there's a little bit of a different thing there. Um, and that tells you like if the path exists or not. A problem with that is if you have a network share, like on Linux, if you have a mount, or on Windows, if you have a network drive mapped, and then you open a project on one of those mounts, and then quit Sublime, unmount that thing, um, the operating system will report that file as no longer existing, right? Like if /mount/Bob was some remote computer originally and I had a file open there, and then the mount goes away, then on Linux the directory is still /mount, but the directory Bob is empty, it has nothing in it. So it doesn't exist, and it can't possibly know that there should be something mounted there, so it just says it doesn't exist. And on Windows, if you had a network drive mapped or you used a UNC path to a server that's not currently accessible, then if you ask it, is this a directory, its answer is no, because it's not. It doesn't distinguish that the reason for that is maybe the server's missing, because maybe the server's not missing. So that's why this script has a //dry run parameter, so you can actually see what the thing is going to do before it actually does it. Does it happen often? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Not in a way. If I close that and do it again. We're just testing here because Ben wants to know if this problem happens frequently. And the answer is no. I'm not sure what makes it happen, but it doesn't happen very often, which is unfortunate. The thing for cleaning a session, this is the bulk of this entire thing. As we can see, we're pretty much all the way down to the main here. So what does this script actually do? It loads the session data from the data directory's local session.sublime session, which we see here in the terminal. Depending on whether you're in merge or whatever, that part doesn't matter because it's already figured that out. And then it creates the name of the session file, but with a temporary extension, and it makes a backup file by taking that session file name and adding the current date and time to it. And if we actually got a session, that is, if the trying to load the session actually worked, then we can scan through, see if an item exists, and add items to either the present list or the missing list. Or sorry, we figure out whether, if this item exists, then we want to add something to the present list, and if it doesn't exist, we want to add it to the missing list, right? And then we append it to that list. And if the list of items that are now present isn't the same as the number of items, then clearly some things were found to be not existent, and it lists those things out. And if you told it that this is a dry run, it just leaves without doing anything. Otherwise, it replaces the loaded dictionary for checked items with the new one. This uses a slice notation to do that. And then it saves the session into that temporary file up there. And if it's actually worked, it renames the existing session file to that backup name with the date and time in it, and then renames the temporary file to the session. So in the unlikely event that something happens that's untoward, you can get your session file back. I think it happens only when you don't have the file open in Sublime, perhaps. Perhaps. There were some questions that were asked about the session recently that I didn't, someone asked, one of them was, how often does Sublime write to the session? And the answer to that, as far as I could tell, is I don't know. I've never actually paid attention to that. Possibly, you could probably track it by seeing how often the file is updated or whatever. But honestly, more or less, I click this button to start Sublime, and then it's pretty much just running 24/7 in the normal state of affairs. I might quit and restart for reasons that were covered in the Discord recently. Like if you have a command that and you unload the plugin, that command will still exist in all of the views because unloading the plugin doesn't also garbage collect all the instances of the classes because Python is garbage collected and reference counted. So you have to do like special magic there to stop that from happening, like quit Sublime. The same thing can happen if you create an event listener and undo the thing. It can also happen if you create an event listener and then rename the class, then the plugin is unloaded, the event listener remains, and under the name and class that it was known to exist under. And then when the class changes, the new name is loaded, and now you have two event handlers. This is for the subble. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but yeah, the problem there's there's new functionality that was added to the Subble command line helper to be able to send standard input into Sublime. And as a result of it, it seems to have some problems in communicating with the running instance. Um, Under Linux, Subble and Sublime Text are the exact same thing. It's one executable, and they talk to each other over dbus. So if Sublime is running and you run Subble, which is really just an alias to Sublime Text, or a shell script that calls Sublime Text, depending on how you've installed Sublime, the second invocation of the thing will use dbus to talk to the running one and pass it information, and then quit unless you specify that command to tell it to hang around and wait. Under Windows and Mac OS, it's a whole separate program from the main Sublime Text executable, and they work in slightly different ways. So if you've ever tried to do something like set Sublime to be your Git editor, it doesn't work the way you want it to if you use the Sublime Text.exe, because that's the actual application. You'll actually hang your terminal if you're using Git Bash and such, because that's an application that just runs forever. You need to use that command line helper. Was that the first run, or was Sublime already running? Sublime was already running. We're going to try one more thing for Ben here. We're going to quit that and do this. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I got to quit it every time, don't I? Pushing the wrong key there is my problem. Quit. It's nice that Sublime starts so fast, so this sort of testing is easier, right? Uh, As far as I can see, it doesn't seem to happen if Sublime's not already running, but that could just be a coincidence. So the whole of this script loads, gets the command line arguments, parses them, figures out the data directory, and cleans the session. So how would we actually want to pull this off? Now, there's a couple of things we sort of need to know here. One is all of the things that we want to be able to actually do something with here. We need the folder history, and I think as we discovered, even if there's multiple windows, and we're going to do this. Oh, actually, maybe we won't even do that. Excuse me, we'll just do that and leave that behind, and quit and restart. And we're not getting any warnings that the session is changing because there aren't any changes in here. But if I did that and quit this and restarted, then we'd get that whole, we should get the, yeah, it changed on disk because this file that it had loaded was modified on disk because it wrote a version where this file was modified. So if we look here for folder history, there's one in the top. That's the contents of this buffer. We don't care about that. And then there's this one. Whoops, crap on a cracker. Where did my cursor go? That was interesting. That may or may not be a problem, but we can only report so many things. Let's do this again. There's that one. Part of the file, part of the file, part of the file. And find history is, yeah, clearly not anything that's that interesting. So there's only one folder history, and I don't think there's an associated thing here in merge because you can't open arbitrary folders. This part remembers what text you entered in the quick switch project in merge and what repository you tried to open. There's a similar thing in Sublime as well. And merge has one window open. The last project was that one. So there isn't an analog for folder history in merge. So that's nice to know. So let's see what we might do here. We're going to slowly build some of this up. We'll see how far we get on this. This isn't something that I would just release after I get to something that works because this is in a repository that Keith and I both control. We generally do reviews of each other's code to see if things can be, made better and such. Does deleting a session file lead to a freshly reverted state? Not a fully freshly reverted state, no. You can see here, for example, I have override audit installed, and I could do stuff like create a report. If I quit this and go to the package directory and go down, go into the local directory, and then if I was to move session.sublime session to session.sublime session.good, if I restart Sublime, I end up with an empty window, which interestingly has a white background. But you see, it didn't save any state. It doesn't know what files I had opened, but override audit still exists and is installed here. The only thing that's stored in the session is the state of the windows and stuff. So now if I went into this and said scratch buffer prompt for syntax. Okay, well, that's a bad one. That one actually still works. What was the other one? Remove. Remember before when I did this, remove came down to remove package because that's the one that I normally pick. But this time it didn't know to do that, right? And note I had that report open. If I was to move session.sublime session.good back over top of that one when we restart Sublime, the windows come back to the position that they were in before. The reason that this is still here just because it was open before I did that. And if we went into the command palette and typed remove, now it's remembering that that associates with this. If you want to make Sublime be completely reverted to a fresh state, what you need to do is the data directory as it's known is actually this Sublime Text 3 folder, the one that contains the packages, installed packages, local, and all that stuff. This is actually the folder that represents the data folder. And that's because if you had a portable version of it, then there'd be a folder alongside the executable named data, and this content would be in it. And on Windows, the same thing happens, but cache and index are in a different location because Windows can take your profile information and shuffle it across the network from computer to computer. And you want things like your installed packages to do that, but the cache and the index are conceivably very large and full of binary files that are very easily recreated. You don't want Windows to sync those across machines if you're logging in on multiple computers in the same domain, so Sublime stores them in a different location. But if I did this, if I went down one and moved Sublime Text 3 to Sublime Text 3.old, for example, now I can't run Sublime anymore. It is completely reverted to a fresh state. So because this is a dev build, I can't do anything with it unless I enter a license key. If it was a stable build and not a dev build, then you'd end up in that sort of that same state as we just saw with the session being gone, except that all of the packages would be missing and everything, because we can see here, if I go back to the package folder, it doesn't actually exist yet because there was no thing created here. There's a no Sublime Text 3 directory, and that's because it actually created this one, and this is only because this is a new build. So it created a new packages folder that has only my user package in it, right? If I did something like go into Sublime Text 3.old local and can't type license and copied that into this local folder, then I could start this because my license has been copied over, but absolutely everything is completely pristine and fresh. I'm in the default theme. Package control is not installed. I'd have to do that. If we go into the command palette, there's no override audit commands. If we did settings, I could probably maximize this window. This is bright, man. I don't even have, any of my settings in here at all. I'm going to go ahead and revert that and then move Sublime Text 3.old to Sublime Text 3 again. So we can get back to the state that I was in originally. So that's how you actually revert something. And that's actually something that was asked, someone asked in the forum just earlier today, as a matter of fact, which makes me wonder, did anybody ever come back on that? No. One of the things that you should always do if you're having a problem with Sublime that seems weird, like something that you don't understand why that thing is happening, try reverting to a fresh state. Go to preferences, browse packages like this. Wait a second for your network attached storage to spin up so that the list of files on it can be gathered like so. Now we're in my packages folder. If you go up one, you get to the directory that would be the data directory. So go up one more, quit Sublime, rename this folder to be something else, start Sublime. You're now completely as if you'd never done anything, as if Sublime is just installed for the first time. then see if your problem still persists. And if it does, it's definitely a Sublime problem. If it doesn't, it's a package problem. And as a part of that, you may need to slowly take the list of packages that you normally use and install them one at a time into your new pristine copy to see if one of those the fact that you're loaded one of those packages is what's causing the thing to break. Then you know that package is the one that's at fault. And at any point, you can do what we just did in the console, quit Sublime, and then rename that directory that you renamed away back to the standard one. And when you restart Sublime, it'll be back exactly the way that you originally started. And the fact that this directory is in your home directory here is the reason why, unless your hard drive is broken and or there's some sort of malware that's corrupting the executable in some way. If you have a problem with Sublime and you think, oh, I'll just uninstall it and reinstall it, that'll make the problem go away. The chances that that actually solves your problem in 99.99% of cases is 0% because everything that is your configuration of Sublime, the settings you've set, the packages you've installed, the key bindings you're using, the plugins you have, all of that is stored here in this location that the installer doesn't touch. So all you're doing is replacing the binary with a fresh copy of the binary. So unless your problem is related to the binary somehow being broken, unlikely to solve anything. And I've never really understood the Windows mentality of you should uninstall and reinstall a program if it's not working. I think it maybe has something to do with the registry and what an awful thing it is, but uninstalling things makes the registry more broken, not less broken. As a fun side note, there's a video editing software called Lightworks that's freely available that was in beta for a while, and I was trying to use it and come to grips with it as my video editing tool of choice. This was years ago, and one of the reasons I sort of gave up on it was the forum and the community that was based around that video software was sort of the opinion that if you had a Windows computer and you had absolutely anything installed on it other than this software, then it's probably not going to work, and they don't want to try to help you diagnose any problems whatsoever. Like, oh, you installed Photoshop on your computer, now you can't run Lightworks and Photoshop. And the thing always came back, well, have you tried reinstalling Windows and then installing Lightworks fresh to see if that solves the problem? And I'm willing to quit Sublime and rename this folder to see if that fixes things. In no way am I interested in replacing my entire operating system to see if that solves a problem. Your product isn't a good product if you have to advise someone to replace their entire operating system in order to see if that might solve the problem. I'm not interested in running anything like that. My time is already short as it is without doing that sort of thing. And I say that as someone that's using Slackware and with a big enough hard drive that I don't even try to pick packages that I might find interesting. I just say install everything but Emacs and go get a cup of coffee and come back and I'm good to go. Um, so what we need to do here, and I think for our purposes, I'm going to close that and we're going to jump these over to this thing over here. We want to keep the Sublime Text one open. Whoops, my bad, do that. We want to be able to pull that folder history out of this thing. So how might we do that? Let's sort of... I had this thought that you may not want this to always be done, or maybe you do. I don't know. I guess we should. But I was thinking that instead of just always cleaning the list of projects and the list of folders and the list of files, maybe there could be a command line argument to tell it which one of those things it should do. Right now, it just always does the one thing. But that's one of those usability things that we could worry about later. So let's see. If we wanted to load the session, then we open the thing, we load the JSON in here. items is equal to that. We can say folders is equal to session folder history if program equals text, else none, like so. Because there's not a folder history in merge, so there's nothing that needs to happen there. And then we could maybe also return folders like this. And if there's going to be more than one thing, this should also return none. This is one of those situations where we realize that my savviness as a Python developer isn't as great as it could be. I may have mentioned that I have several decades of experience with a lot of programming languages, but I've only been using Python since 2016 because at some point I did a tutorial thing with Python, and the idea of indent being important sort of irritated me because I don't like tools that enforce a code style on me. So I never really did much with Python. I never had much call to do anything with Python. I was more of a Lua guy, but I wanted to be able to customize Sublime, so I got on board. And the idea of indent in Python being important doesn't bother me as much as it used to, but I refuse to use lint tools because I don't like people telling me that much about, you know, my programs not being Pythonic. Your comment is too long. Your comment shouldn't start with a hash. And there are some things in there that are just a little too esoteric for me. We want to find the place where load session is called, and we need to actually pull that. Check folders is going to be that value. And what we're going to do is print check folders like this, and then we can test it and see if it works. Sublime session clean. And we're going to specify dry run like so. We're definitely getting some stuff there, and if we did -p merge like this, then we end up with none. So that's good. Unfortunately, this seems like something that we need to maybe. You worked as a game dev before? Not officially as like a paid game developer, but I did spend a long time working with Lua. Yeah. I have done game development. If you check OdatNurd.net, there's some stuff there. It's always been sort of a hobby of mine. Although I haven't really done a lot of game development actually in Lua, I tend to do it more in C and such. In fact, I'm not even entirely sure here. I have. It's sort of worrying that that is taking as long as it is. Oh, I see. There's a Git repository in here. I have, and I'm not going to try to run it because I don't think I have SDL installed, but back a couple of years ago, I was working on a complete remake. Well, I guess not remake, ground up rewriting of the Dragon Warrior game for the original Nintendo Entertainment System, including stuff like taking the actual music from the cart and turning it into a WAV file and stuff like that. So I was using newer graphics but re-implementing the game from scratch. Um, but I haven't really, yeah, I haven't really used Lua. Actually, Lua might be actually bound in this thing. Um, Basically, it comes down to anytime I need to have a program where I want to have some sort of scripting language embedded in it, then I tend to choose Lua for that because it is ridiculously easy to embed in your own program. It's written from the ground up to be something that's embedded in another application. So it's a lot easier to do something with that than, like, say, Python, which requires a little bit more work. Although there is there's a version of C that you can do that with. Tiny C might be the thing that I'm thinking of there. But I even for a long time used my own custom Lua interpreter as a back-end CGI thing and wrote a bunch of code for that as well. So we need to maybe refactor some of this code because we're going to want it to happen more than once, right? So I'm not entirely sure what the best way to do that is. But we know check folders is definitely something that works. So maybe we might say something like def clean workspaces. And I don't know what that might need, but we need to do at least this, right? And we need to do, say, at least that. So we might need check items because that's that. And we need the program. So present and missing are in here. Oop, crap. Check items is something that exists. Program is something that exists. Item missing, that's present missing status append. And I guess, let's say we put this line in here too. Maybe that one. And then we say return true, return false. So we might say something along the lines of, oh, fun fact about being a game developer. I just did Devember for a long time before I discovered Sublime. My Devember projects were game development related. I made a simple web game engine in TypeScript and created games with it and stuff like that. In fact, one of the things that led me to using Sublime, and I think one of my Devember goals for the very first, like I guess maybe 2016, or I'm not even sure, was I was using WebStorm as my IDE at the time because I had a license for it because I was doing Java stuff and I was using IntelliJ IDEA by JetBrains, and they went to that stupid subscription scheme that we you get access to all their stuff. So I thought, I'll use WebStorm, and it was pretty awful. And then I decided to use Sublime Text instead. That's actually how the awfulness of WebStorm led me to see, is there any other software I could be using for this? And then I discovered Sublime, and I used it for almost an entire day before I thought, yeah, these people need my money. Even if this isn't something that's necessarily for me, it's just too awesome to not reward them for their hard work. So I bought like a license the next day, and it's been my editor for everything other than server related stuff where I have to use VI because there's no graphical X environment ever since. Um, let's say, assuming, yeah, given a list of workspace files or or git directories, modify the list so that any folders or files that no longer exist are no longer in the list of checked items. Like so. Oops. And so the idea here is calling this, we'd give it the list of items. We might actually even modify this to be, let's say, workspaces and programs. So for every item in the list of workspaces, I guess that was called items. Yeah, well, git directory workspace, kind of the same thing. If the item actually exists, then we want to modify the present list. Otherwise, we want to add the missing list and then add it. So that's when we're all done, all the workspaces end up in one of these two places. Either it still exists or it doesn't. If the list of things that's now present is not the same as the length of the list of that one, then it knows that items are missing. And that whole, this check up here uses is directory for merge because the list of items is a Git repository directory. And in Sublime Text, it needs to check for the workspaces, which again are at the bottom of this file. These are files, so it needs to check as a file for that and a path for that. And if that was the case, it would modify the list of workspaces in place and return true. Otherwise, it would return false. So given that, if session is not none, we should be able to say clean workspaces, right? And we need to pass it check items, which is the list of like workspaces or Git folders we want to do something with. And we need to pass it the program like this. That's going to be all of this information. We could say if clean workspace like this. This stuff all goes away. And then we say if this is a dry run, leave. We don't have to do this part anymore. And then it can go ahead and save the session. Otherwise, it can do that. So in theory, this still works the same way as it did before. So we're going to do this. We need a little bit more stuff in here as well. Okay, so the first thing we want to do here is say if workspaces is not none. We can't do this. If workspaces is none, return false. So that if there is no list of stuff, don't even try to do this, right? There's no reason to do anything there because there's nothing to be done, which is important because as we already know, there's not going to be one. If you have the program set to merge, it's only going to happen if the text is set to local. So we might even say something like print cowardly leaving like this, so that we could say, if we do that, we get that action. And if we said the program was merged, I would have thought that we would see something there. Oh, maybe I need to log it. Oh, no, that other print worked, right? Well, that's interesting. Oh, right. No, never mind me. Yeah, that's always going to be there. I was already thinking ahead to the part that we're about to do. Okay, so in order to sort of test that this is actually a thing, what we're going to do is go to temp bob, make dir sample, cd sample, git init, like so, and then subl minus n dot, and then we're going to save project as and save it into, oh, you are a giant jerk. That's what you are. Dun, dun, dun. Need to go here. I don't like this new file browser in GTK3. I'd like to find the person that thought this was better than the one in GTK2 and give them a little bit of a slap. We need temp, and we need bob, and we need sample, and then we'll call this no longer exists .sublime project, like so, and save it, and go out of there and quit this, and then restart. So one of the things we could do in this window is say this no longer exists. We can see it right here. I tried to point at it like you can see where I'm pointing in the webcam. So that's the thing that exists there, right? And then we're going to cancel that, and we're going to come back over to the terminal, and then we're going to smurge dot this thing so we can see there's 2 untracked files in this thing, and quit it. And then we're going to, again, quit Sublime and restart this. So what we're going to see here is, here in the session for please render my tab correctly, for Sublime Text, there is in here this line in recent workspaces for this no longer exists, that's Sublime Workspace. And over here in merge, there's this directory temp bob sample, like so, right? Now what we're going to do is this. Sample no, like so. Now, if I was to type this dry run for merge, then we know that it's finding that there's one thing that it no longer needs to have there, that folder, because it's gone. But I specified dry run, so it actually stopped before it did anything. The fact that it says expunged is the case there. And if I did the same thing for not merge but text, which is the default, we can see it found that one workspace no longer exists. So what I'm going to modify here is logging.info dry run enabled terminating, just so that you could see that it didn't actually expunge anything, like so. And we could do the same thing this way. Which is probably good now that there's more than one thing that might actually change. Now, we need a new one of these for def clean recent folders, like so, and that would be folders and program, right? And given a list of folders, modify the list so that any folders that no longer exist are no longer in the list. Comments are a thing, you know, that could be made nicer. And then here we can say if folders is none, cowardly failing, and then return false. And we would return false down there as well. And then we can say for item in folders. And we would sort of copy this same thing, but we need to do a little bit of work here. We need to pretend that the program is always merge in this case. No, except that that'll totally break that. Oh, actually, no, it won't. Because if the program is merge and this is a dictionary, then it gets the path out of it. Otherwise, it returns a string. That whole backwards compatibility saves us because this is going to call item path with the item we give it and the program. So if we call this clean workspace thing, we paste this down in here like so in place of this. Oops. If we copied, well, say this. Honestly, maybe we don't even. I'm going to do this just for now, and then we can decide if it's strictly needed or not. Whoops. We want to replace that with that. We don't want, we want this program and this program to always be merge. We already know that if folders is none, it'll do nothing and leave. And that's always going to be the case for merge. So if we get in here, then program clearly must be text, but we can still use merge so that it'll look it up in that list and do that sort of business. And so we should be able to say or and clean recent folders for check folders and program. That's like really long, so we probably don't want that, right? So we probably want something like this, except that you probably want that more. I have no idea what the best way to do that is. So if we did this, maybe we reset this list so we can actually see what's happening here. For merge, it thinks that it should expunge the default, that one thing, and that's all that's going to happen, but it does nothing. And if this was text, then we end up with that. Oh, shouldn't it also be finding the new thing? That's interesting. Again, I'm sort of surprised. Oh, this can't be an OR, can it? Because it did a clean workspace and it worked, it no longer needs to call clean recent folders because it knows it needs to do something. So we might say folders equals clean workspaces, check items and program, and oops, sorry. Check 1, yeah, and then I don't know, like check 2 is equal to clean recent folders for check folders and program, and then we can say, instead of that, we can say if check 1 or check 2, or actually we could say if any check 1, check 2. Actually, I guess we could probably do that. No, we don't want to do that. We definitely need to do all the tests. If we did any this and that in line, then we're going to have the exact same problem. So we'll do that. So if we do it with text, well, there, at least it's breaking now, so that's good. In line 173, oh, it's folders in this one. Right. Don't just copy and paste a thing, actually make sure it works. There is a lot of folders in here. Oh, but that is still, any takes exactly one argument. Oh. What's the better way to do this? This? So there are currently 54 items in the list of recent folders that don't need to be there, but are clogging up my business. And in merge, we'll see it say, when we run it for merge, that there's one repository, and then it's cowardly failing to do anything for the other one because it didn't pull any folders, so that one can just go away. So that is actually working. Now, part of this is if this and this are the same except for this line and the fact that program isn't actually used, then we could say clean items. Given a list of workspace file names, folders, or Sublime merge recent repository objects, modify the list so that and I guess this was checked items like this. And then we could say if checked items is none, return false. So that's what this thing was doing, right? Otherwise, this is more or less all the same stuff. We could actually print out no items doing nothing, like so. And then we could say that check one is clean items for the list of check items and the program, and check two is clean items for check folders and merge. And here we'll say always use merge because it will check folders for us. And we can make that comment a little bit nicer later. So that should do the exact same thing as it was doing before, but now we don't need that other thing, right? And I think we should be able to even notice that there's none of those, so I could actually, whoops, that's probably not something I should have done. Get rid of those, like so. So maybe I might do something smart like this, and then people could actually see this thing, because I'm not sure how long the lines are being there. So let's reset this. So if I did this for merge, we get that expunging defunct items, excuse me, for the one thing, and no items doing that. We might actually want to say, try that with text, and again end up with workspaces and folders. So maybe, okay, that still works. Item name, like so. And let's say mod item name. Like that. And now when we clean items, we say that this one is, oh man, stuff. And this one is recent folders. So if we did it for merge, then it's expunging defunct stuff and then doing nothing for the other one. And if we do it for text, it is expunging 54 items, but we say stuff and recent folders. So this needs to be workspaces if program equals text, else get repositories. Recent repositories. Maybe this one should actually say recent workspaces instead. Yeah. So we can do something like that and end up with saying that expunging defunct recent workspaces, and there's one item, and then defunct recent folders, and that's a ton of folders, and then there's 54 items, and then dry run unlabeled and nothing happened. And if we were to do it for merge, then we end up with expunging defunct recent repositories. And okay. Maybe we might even take that out. And this should look a little bit nicer. Maybe. Instead of being check items, this should be, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's named items because it's folders and it's other stuff. And oh, let's just see. pardon me for just a second here. Ben is asking a question on the Discord. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, force the program to be merge because merge handles folders for us. Apparently, and it doesn't support the notion of recent folders anyway. So that's those two things. Okay. What was that? I guess that's okay. How long have we been going here? Hour 46. We're doing not too shabby here on this. We're actually now, I think this should just transparently work, by the way, because when we call these items, the reason why this uses this notation is because this checked items came out of the session JSON object from somewhere inside of the object. If we just assign this to be a brand new list of whatevers, then we would have to remember where we pulled it from, which was that stuff that happened up here. When it loads it, it knows that the items have to come from certain keys depending on certain programs, like so. But if we use the slice notation, then we can change the content of this and basically have it take the old items and cram them, or the new items and cram them into a new list that replaces the old list still in the same object that it was originally referenced from, so that when we get to this part where we save the session, all the changes that we made are just automatically already in there, if you will. So I think that is what we like there. Let's zoom that like so. I like the looks of that a little better for this. Now, that's going to be any of those if dry run enabled. So we wanted to that one can just always be that. We can say item type equals recent %s and mod, and then this will be workspaces if program equals text else. Woo! Repositories, and then this one doesn't have to be quite so long, and it can just be item type. Should still work the same way, I think. So that is doing the good stuff too. Now, keep in mind, you shouldn't run this while Sublime is actively running, because as we said, it won't do anything. But that does allow us to test this, I think, because if we were in the Sublime Text session here and we looked at the recent folders, which is at the top of this file, I was persistent doing that the bad way. The first item in there is like that one, right? If I did this, but took out the dry run, then it should modify the session file that currently exists on disk, which is the one that's loaded on the right, which would cause Sublime to reload it. But then when we quit Sublime, it'll just get clobbered over anyway. So we did that. We can see this list now no longer has that thing, but we can see various other stuff in here. That got nicely tightened up. And if we were to quit and restart, I would imagine, hopefully, that would come back. But, maybe not. We'll see what happens. No, huh? That should not really be the case. So that's interesting. Nevertheless, it's easy enough to cram stuff in there if we need to. So that means we should also be able to do this with merge, right? We can also always get the old session back because I backed them all up. Whoops. We open merge and go like so. There is no more of that this no longer exists thing. So we've done part one of that whole operation. And part two is coming up with the list of recent files. That one is perhaps a little more hairy. Recent files. I can't remember what the stupid key was called now, to be perfectly honest. And I don't think this exists in merge neither. So let's go to the top. Okay, so it's not folder history. It's not a new, well, it might be now. It's not that. It's not a build system choice. It's not a command palette. It's not a console. File history. That's the thing we're interested in. Under settings, file history is one, and then there's another one here, and this is inside of the Windows key. And there's more than one potential window. But let's go ahead and do that. There's currently, that one doesn't count. There's 4 of these bad boys. So we need a way to pull those all out too. Yeah. What's a good way to do this? Alas, poor coffee. I miss you. Fortunately, I have a little bit of water, so we're still good to go. We have 7 minutes to go on this bad boy, but we might even be able to pull this off. I don't think there's a version of file history in this thing because we don't really edit files in merge, right? So here's a list of recent repositories. Here's a list of the items that it knows how to select a repository from the list, and a list of windows with the path that they currently have open. Which, as we can see when we actually start merge, technically maybe a problem because that folder is no longer there. Theoretically, that's something our script could handle. It could try to remove that window from the list because it knows it's not something that exists anymore. But it seems like it should kind of be merge's problem to, because if we actually deleted this and we weren't running this script at all, it's still opening a window for a folder that no longer exists, right? Yeah, you reload that thing. So we're going to say we don't need to worry about that for that. We only need to worry about it for here, and we need to worry about file history. So there needs to be multiple file histories, and session recent if program is merge, else that. Maybe it's time for us to make this a little bit nicer looking. If program equals merge, then items equals session recent, like this. And the other one is folders is equal to none, right? Because that's what we said here. Else, actually, let's do it this way and move these two down. And then here we can say items is equal to this one, session workspaces, recent workspaces, like so. We'll copy that and paste it here. And folders is equal to session folder history, like this. So, and then we can go ahead and return them. So if the program is text, then the items is the workspaces, recent workspaces list, which is this one. If program is merged, don't do that, so it's this one. And folder history if it's text, else none. So folder history. Here it's recent if program is merged, and none. So these ones don't have to be here anymore. And that could go like so. And then the last thing is, let's say, a list of file history keys, because there can be more than one of them. Yeah, and the reason why we want to do this here is because if it's text, we want to do that, and here we want to say files equals none, and here we can say files equals none, and then we can do this. And then when in the place where we find load session, we can say check files, like so. Is that. So it all should still work the way we expect it to. Just going to quickly zing that down. Yeah, okay, that seems like it's probably looking the way we want it to look. Maybe going long on this one. Merge, dry run, nothing to do in there, and dry run text. No missing items found. I think that should still be working. We'll of course do some tests. I need to also test this under Windows and Mac OS, which isn't something that's going to happen in the stream because I don't really have a good way to do that sort of thing without using a remote desktop, something or other. That's a little longer than it needs to be. So now we can grab the actual files out of this thing. So we might say that it's a list. And the first item in the list is the session settings file history key, like so. And then let's print files like this. So if we did this for text, oh shoot, not enough fast to unpack. Did I forget in session clean at line 238? Expected 4 got 3. Session items, folders, files. Oh, shoot, sorry. There needs to be one down there too. Key editing file history. Oh, it's a new Windows settings. Pardon me. Settings, new window settings, file history, like so. There we go. That's one big long list of files. Good. And where are the rest of these things? If we look under the key Windows, like so, then this is a list of window objects which contains a potential, I think, if I remember correctly, file history key as well, which is may or may not be the same as the other one. I'm not sure what a good way to do this is. That's a top level Windows key, right? if I took this way up? Scrolling, 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 scroll hide. Dun, dun, dun. You know, sometimes you realize as you're part way through a really long, redundantly stupid operation that there was a faster way to do it, but there's this whole sunk cost fallacy that says you've spent so much time doing it so far, you might as well just keep going. Yeah, top level windows is a list. Let's comment, oops, don't do that. Let's comment out that one for the time being. And I'm not 100% sure now that I think of it that if this is pulling it directly out of these, I think it should still work. I mean, we'll find out in a second, won't we? If we said something like files.append this, then we'd end up with an empty list of things plus that one. So if we cleared this and did that, we still end up with that same item. And if this was merge, then we don't see that because nothing's happening right yet. So that's still doing a thing. There's still one. Files. We need to say session Windows, and inside Windows there's a key named file history. That's what we ultimately want, right? W file history or W in session Windows, I think is what we're looking for here. And then we'll print len files. And this can probably be tightened up if we're going to do it that way. And if we came over here, there's 3 lists because there's currently 2 windows, right? So if I was to close this window like this, quit Sublime, and then restart it so that the session gets recycled, then if we did this, we end up with 2. Okay. Now we have a lot of lists of folders, and these are probably at some level redundant, right? But we're going to go ahead and do that. And then I think what we can do is say check 3 equals false, and then for file list in check files, if check 3, oops, sorry, if clean items, and the thing we're going to clean is the file list with the program as we have it. We don't need to do anything special with that. And this would be recent files. Then check 3 equals true. So we could actually say check 3 equals clean items or check 3, I think. Check 3 is equal to this or check 3. And the reason we can do that, I think, is that for each iteration through the list, we say that this value should be either this, if it's true, or if it's not true, then it needs to test to see if this one is true. But because this one's first, this one always happens first. So anytime this returns true, check 3 gets set to true, even though it's false there by default. And if this ends up being false, then the value remains false until one of the items comes through. And then this could say check 3. Now we're going to see some stuff in here. I'm going to do this. There's 60 files that no longer exist that I have recently done something with. Expunging recent files. 60 items. Expunging recent files. Yeah, and the problem with this sort of is that there's more than one window's worth of them, right? But if I took out the dry run here, and we don't even need the -p text because that's the default. It says it saved a new session file, so let's go ahead and quit that and restart. And I think if that was the case, like we saw last time, oops, then no missing items are found. So it actually cleaned this thing. And it actually, oh, okay. This needs to be checked. If check files is not none, then do that. So that doesn't break it, and that's still working. And the list of recent files in this window should be theoretically, a lot smaller than it was. The other way to do this is, this whole clear items thing, but it throws away all of them and not just some of them. So that's a thing. And this is a recent folder, which I guess should actually exist. So let's open a new window because I never really used that command before and see what that does. Open recent. And this is folders. Okay, well, yeah, that one definitely exists. Does this one still exist? Yep. All right. So I think that's sort of what we wanted to do with this stream. And nicely, oh, hang on, we got a thing here. Oh. I'm going to do some things. So I think we're going to click a thing. I'm going to quit this with this one. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to try something exciting here. And we're going to go to cd local Sublime Text and cp Sublime Text, sublimetext.org, like so. So now this should actually do nothing, I would have thought. What is this actually doing? Huh. Oh, I copied it. Whoops. Sublime Text, sublimetext.org. Oh, I swear. Okay. Yeah, that won't work. And subl, no such file or directory. Great. So cp home downloads Sublime Text stripped to Sublime Text. Fire it up. Anything? Bueller? Bueller? Oh. Smart party. Cancel. Ooh, what happened there? That's an unfortunate turn of events. Do it that way. that did not go as expected. I think I got some testing to pull here, and we have gone a little over the length of the stream as we would normally use it. So I think we should perhaps go ahead and call this stream to an end because we have done what it is we wanted to do over there in that window right there. Not the one above me, that one over there. Um, we're going to do some more testing here, though. Um, so that's all we're going to have for tonight. So that's actually worked out not too bad. We learned a little bit about sessions, and this script is actually worked out a lot nicer. Now, I still do want to do a little bit of code cleanup in here because this isn't as Pythonic or as nice looking as it theoretically could be looking. But it's not too terrible. And one of the things I'd like to do is maybe add arguments for which one of these things gets done. Because right now it's cleaning all of them. Or maybe that's what we want to have happen. That's one of the things I'm going to cover with my illustrious pal Keith when he reviews this code after I've cleaned it up a little bit. Kind of don't like this whole hacky thing we're doing where we're pretending that the program is merge even though it's not in order to get something to work. So there may need to be something that is done there. But that's all we have for this stream. If you have been watching, thank you so much. Remember, you can always subscribe to know when these things are happening every Tuesday at 8 p.m. PST. Down in the description of this video, there's a link to the other channel where I do my more targeted tutorial videos. We're smack dab near the middle-y endish of a video series on color schemes in Sublime Text. The next video is going to be about the color modification function that lets you blend colors together. Then we're going to move into rules in color schemes, and that might do it for color schemes. I'm not sure. We'll see. The rules thing might end up being a couple of videos, and then we're going to start rolling back into other tutorials like the requested one on find in files and how that thing all operates. And coming real soonish now, hopefully the video series on package development in Sublime Text. So until that next video on this channel or on the other one, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.